Well, welcome back to the Leadership DVD for Legacy Builder Sport Discipleship Series, Book 2, The Quest, Coaching for Jesus in a Bottom Line World. This is week 2, and hopefully you had a great first week. We are now heading into week 2, The Climb, Stepping Stones or Spiritual Landmarks. Now, if you go to page 36 in your book, and back in the Leader's Guide, let's jump down here and let's look at week 2. The purpose of this lesson is threefold. One, we want to help the individual recognize that God has been in control of their lives since day one. Secondly, we will help the individual learn how to put God's will in their lives first as they deal with career decisions as well as daily decisions. Lastly, we will help the individual take a look at their past and put together a spiritual landmark list that'll help them see how God has worked in their lives and how that can help them as they want to make godly decisions in the future. The main focus of this lesson, again, is developing their spiritual landmark list and seeing how God is going to work in their lives in the future potentially. So we want to give them, again, some tools for their toolbox. Now, Scripture, again, every lesson starts with Scripture and ends with Scripture. The reason the climb in the coaching culture is such a big deal. Everybody's trying to climb up the ladder and get the best job, the best place, the best paying job, the best chance to win. And again, we're on a climb, but it's a different climb. We're on a different climb than the rest of the world. So we need to look at again, let's start with Romans 8:28. I'm not going to put sand in your sandals this week. It's your job to go research that. You get a good Bible that has an intro in it, talks about the author, has a commentary. You can find exactly what you're looking for, okay? Well, let's go to Romans 8:28 and read that scripture. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. What then shall we say in response to this? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Now, as we look at that scripture, first of all, we look at, and in all things God works for the good. We've talked about that verse before in our previous book, all things, again, and we talked about will work for the good in all things for those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. Again, in the Greek, that word called means to be set apart. I always touch on the fact, again, that these coaches are set apart. They're different than the rest of the world. And what I mean by that is we're not some kind of an elite group. What I mean is God has called them to further his kingdom through coaching. And again, the two biggest avenues in the world that cross all gender, all socioeconomic barriers, all race are through media and through sport. And we need to understand that we're especially called, and God has predestined us to be here as coaches to do this. So let's jump down now to point 1. And as we talk about this, we'll just look at the fill in the blank here a little bit here. As coaches, it seems as though we're always trying to direct the paths of our careers. Isn't it good to know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who've been called according to his purpose? That means that everywhere you've been and all the experiences you've had are part of a master game plan that God has designed for you. Now, our goal as Christian coaches needs to be seeking God's viewpoint in all things and make our decisions based upon his will. Now, as you look back, and this is the question that I want you to hone in on in this lesson, as you look back and you ask the coaches to look back in their coaching careers, describe a situation when you knew God was involved. Now, for me, this is where I tell a story. I was an offensive coordinator at a Division I college down in Tennessee, and everybody on the staff got fired. Everybody. Head coach was bought out, and all of us were fired. I could not get a job anywhere. For some reason, all my buddies, they couldn't hire me, the timing wasn't right, or that job didn't pay enough, or all sorts of different reasons came up. And I got to tell you, it's interesting. I ended up taking a small college job as the head football coach at that university at Division III school. Didn't want to be at Division III, didn't want to go to a small private school, wanted to stay at the big schools, but that was the only job I could get. And my family, I needed to feed my family. So we went to Chicago, we took the job, and guess what? 2 years later, God sent a man into my office that changed my life, that God used to change my life to teach me how to coach another way and how to coach biblically. If I never would have been fired and couldn't have gotten all those other jobs, I never would have met that guy at that university and brought him in as a consultant. It wouldn't have happened. So again, ask them to share what's a situation where they knew God was involved. Maybe they got a job, they didn't get a job, but have them talk about that a little bit. Now, jump down to point number 2. My will versus God's will. Again, we want to help them in their decision-making process in this lesson. Part of the journey that you're on is you're transformed and you're on a quest. All of a sudden now, my decisions, I run everything through Jesus Christ. I'm not like I used to be. I don't base my decision upon how much money will I make or how many games am I going to win or is this the absolute best thing for my career right now. I base everything now on Jesus Christ, and that's different. I'm living a transformed life. So now we need to understand that there's a big battle going on between God's will and my will. And this is how we teach them to handle that. And it starts with Scripture. So let's go back. Let's look at Matthew, one of the Gospels, Matthew chapter 6. And again, Matthew's a guy, you talk about transform. Here's a guy that had a tax collector shop. And, and by the way, back in the day, being a tax collector was a very lucrative business. And he walked away from all that to follow Jesus. So let's see what Matthew had to say about this situation. We're going to Matthew chapter 6. And we're going to read verses 9 through 11. And here it is. And this is what Jesus, and this is an eyewitness account by Matthew. This is what Jesus had to say about prayer and some other things. This then is how you should pray. And this goes along with how to make decisions. We need to pray first. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Now, give us this day our daily bread. Now, we need to understand, this is the prayer that Jesus taught the disciples, okay, who were leaders, all right? Now, as we look at this, you're going to see why that scripture comes alive as you jump down. Whether we're making career decisions or daily decisions, God has given us the ability to make choices. Now, it's very important. As a Christian coach, our choices aren't really between good and bad. As a Christian, it's pretty simple. Am I going to go beat up the other coach after a game or not? Well, we don't usually deal with those decisions because we're past that point. We know that's wrong and we're not going to do that. But what we do have is a lot of decisions of, well, you know what? I'm at home tonight. I'm spending time with my family, and a player has called me and they want me to come over to their house and speak to their parents, and they've got some friends over. They want to meet the coach and talk about why we coach biblically. Those are two good things to do. The hard thing is, which one do I do? And that's a difficult call. So we're going to help the coach make that decision. So again, we want to make God-pleasing decisions, as it looks at on page 12 there, by starting by choosing God's will first, not ours. Does that make sense? So again, I really hone in on this little example of we want to make sure God is, again, he's at the beginning of the decision, not at the end. So here's what I mean by that. We don't want to say, Lord, please help me to get this job if it's your will. We want to say, Lord, if it's your will, I'm putting your will first. Let me get this job. Does that make sense? So understand, we got to flip it a little bit. We always love to put, oh yeah, by the way, if it's your will, God, go ahead and have that happen. We want to put God first. So I love having this little question go on here too, where they're supposed to describe a situation where you had to choose between good and better. How did you come to the decision, and did you put God's will first? Let the coaches share in dialogue how they did that and share some stories.